Federalism presentation gun control. What the states have to say. Both states and the central government agree that more needs to be done to decrease gun violence. There's been increasing gun violence for several years now, and there's only been a handful of states which have passed stricter gun control legislation. Among these legislations have been requiring background checks or even training before purchasing a weapon. Other states, however, have open carry, which allows someone to carry a weapon in a public place unconcealed. Regardless of the place, it is now decided that states will have power over gun control. What does the federal government have to say? The federal government has said very little about gun control since they wrote the Constitution. The Second Amendment has said that people have the right to bear arms. The only legislation that has been made by the central government has come after mass shootings, such as the Parkland shooting, Las Vegas, and Sandy Hook, where bump stocks were banned. Although a lot of pressure has been put on the central government, not much has been done. Another example of the central government opinion on gun control has been in the District of Columbia versus Heller court case in 2008, where gun rights were given to the states. The Supreme Court decided that the Second Amendment could only be impeded upon if there was good and rational reason. Although there are some broad regulations that need to be made by the central government, legislation regarding gun control should be handled by the individual states. What does the Constitution say? The Second Amendment is the most relevant in the topic of gun control, as it says, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. The Constitution was made very broad because it was meant to be interpreted differently by different people. The right to bear arms is clearly an enumerated power. The main debate, though, is over the idea of whether individuals have the right to own guns, or if groups who are members of a militia have the right to own guns, and what kinds of guns each person has the right to own. The express, reserved, and concurrent powers. Maintaining law and order is a shared power between state and federal government, which is what is brought up about the topic of gun control. This example is a marble cake federalism in the Constitution. If the central government deems it necessary and proper to pass gun legislation to maintain law and order, they may be able to do so. However, it is within the state powers to protect public safety, which is why people in states think they have the right to own guns. Finally, the Supremacy Clause means that the federal law is supreme, and so that if legislation is passed by the federal government, the states will have to abide. Positives and negatives of federal power. Federal power over gun control legislation would lead to one law covering a wide variety of environments. This would mean that in states like Texas, where people love to hunt and live in rural areas where they can use guns to protect themselves, they wouldn't be allowed to have guns. And in areas like Chicago, where there is expected to be around 4,000 victims of gun violence this year alone, they wouldn't be able to pass legislation to restrict this gun violence. First of all, the Second Amendment is currently perceived as accepting most forms of weapons. Prohibiting gun sales or even loading them goes against the Commerce Clause and the Elastic Clause, which grants power to regulate interstate commerce to the state. This is an enumerated power expressed in the Bill of Rights, so any violation would be deemed unconstitutional. This would cause, because it's unconstitutional, not many laws would be passed, and there wouldn't be much restriction on firearms, so areas like Chicago would have to deal with increased gun violence. Positives and negatives of state power. If states had the power, people would be happy. In Texas, where 44% of people own a gun, there'd be much looser regulation around gun control, and other states who experience far more gun violence can pass stricter legislation. In this case, people would feel like their voices are being heard, and states would be able to please their people by making their opinions matter. A major downside of the states controlling gun laws, however, is that if guns from a looser state happen to be brought into a stricter state, the government could legally intervene using the Commerce Clause because guns are being between states, not just inside one state. One rebuttal is that the central government should make blanket regulations on gun control for the entire country. A ban or even strict regulations on gun control is unconstitutional, as explained earlier. A majority of liberals and Democrats are very against guns, and if selected into office, would place heavy restrictions on gun sales. Although people in some regions would be pleased by this, others would be completely against this and would feel violated. The removal of guns from people's hands would be seen as tyrannical by the government, and can be seen as a first act of tyranny to disarm the people and strip them of their rights. The federal government should pass legislation that would restrict weapon sales, but the state government should be in control of every other aspect of gun control. With this system, state governments would please their people by passing legislation that suits the people's wishes, and the federal government could maintain safety by enacting legislation that would ban or pass extreme limitations on weapons that have been used in mass shootings and domestic terror attacks. Thank you for watching.